For this discussion, I read from Thomas Kidd's George Whitefield, America's Spiritual Founding Father, Chapter 6, titled To Revive the Flame Again, Whitefield Comes to New England. George Whitefield was an Englishman, but felt the need to spend most of his preaching days in the colonies. He took Jonathan Edwards' new way of preaching, that the power of conversion was in the person's hands and no longer in the church's. And Whitefield, who was trained in theater, was a great orator and was able to draw large crowds in the thousands to these sermons. In his sermons, he was known to be able to draw tears from people by the way he would say the word Mesopotamia. He would ask for donations during these sermons, but they were used to fund his travels and his orphanages, especially the one known as Bethesda in Savannah, Georgia. His skills were so good that he was able to get donations from the likes of people like Benjamin Franklin, who wrote about attending a sermon in Philadelphia that a quote from Franklin said, "I silently resolved he should get nothing from me. I had in a pocket a handful of copper, 3 or 4 silver dollars, and 5 pistols of gold. As he proceeded, I began to soften and concluded to give the coppers. Another stroke of his oratory made me ashamed of that and determined me to give the silver. And he finished so admirably that I emptied my pocket wholly into the collector's dish, gold and all." It was said that Franklin and Whitefield were good friends, and they went back and forth, but Whitefield was never really able to convert Franklin over into being a strong Christian. But anyways, this chapter, the main theme to me that stuck out the most was how Whitefield felt about slavery. In this time in history, it was 100 years before the Civil War, so slavery was pretty much throughout all the colonies. But something that really irked Whitefield was how slaves were treated, especially in the South. He didn't want to upset the status quo of what was going on, but still, from his perspective, suffering on earth as a slave did not compare with the suffering of eternal torments in hell. So he wanted to be able to preach and speak to everybody, including the slaves, which upset slaveholders. But him and another preacher named Samuel Davies, wanted to break up the monotony of preaching to all white crowds. They both felt that slaves had the right to the gospel as well. They eased slaveholders' minds by saying that being a Christian would make the slaves better servants. Davies noticed that pretty much all the slaves were illiterate, so his tactic was to use hymns and songs to help spread his gospel throughout, slavery times, and to help people learn better throughout songs rather than teaching them to read. Another person who placed more emphasis on the reading part was a man named John Rogers. He was a Presbyterian minister in New York, and in 1773 he started what was known as the American Society for Promoting Religious Knowledge Among the Poor in British Colonies, or the SKRP. It spread throughout New England and New York. It was also known as the first Bible Society in the free world, and it specialized in teaching literacy to poors, blacks, and Native Americans by using the Bible. Thanks.